to
If you fly over the Sahara today, you see a world of absolute, crushing silence. It is a vast, monochromatic ocean of sand, where life seems like an anatomical impossibility. But then, a thin, shimmering ribbon of blue cuts through the gold. This is the Nile, the longest river on Earth, and the single vein that kept the heart of a civilization beating for 3,000 years. To the people who lived there, the world was divided into two colors: the red land of the deadly desert and the black land of the fertile mud. Life was a fragile miracle, gifted by the river and snatched away by the sun. But the Egyptians didn't just want to survive, they wanted to endure. They looked at the horizon, where the sun died every evening, only to be reborn every morning, and they reached a startling conclusion. If the sun could live forever, why couldn't they? Before the golden masks and the towering monuments, Egypt was a chaotic collection of warring tribes, scattered along the riverbanks like broken glass. It was a time of the Great Struggle. Every year, the tribes waited in terror for the Nile to flood. If the water rose too high, their mud brick homes were washed away. If it rose too low, they starved. They were at the mercy of a world they didn't understand. But around 5,000 years ago, a man emerged from the south. History knows him as Narmer, the first pharaoh. He realized that as long as the people were divided, they were slaves to the desert. He forged the two lands, the delta of the north and the valley of the south, into a single, unified machine. Narmer created something more powerful than an army. He created the identity of the pharaoh. He wasn't just a king, he was a god on earth, the bridge between the human and the divine. For the first time, the people weren't just fighting for food, they were working for eternity. But as the first dynasties settled into power, they faced a devastating realization. Their homes were made of mud. Their palaces were made of wood. Everything they built eventually crumbled back into the dust. They became obsessed with a single word: Ma'at. It meant order, balance, and cosmic justice. To achieve Ma'at, they had to build something that could defeat time itself. In the third dynasty, a brilliant architect named Imhotep stood on the desert plateau of Saqqara and looked at the traditional royal tombs, flat mud brick boxes called mastabas. He saw them rotting. Imhotep decided to do the impossible. He decided to stack stone on top of stone, reaching higher and higher, creating a stairway to heaven. He built the step pyramid for King Djoser. It was the first time in human history that a structure of this scale was made entirely of stone. It was a declaration of war against the elements. But stone was heavy. Thousands of men had to learn how to move mountains without the wheel or iron tools. They died in the quarries. They broke their backs in the sun. But as the step pyramid rose, the Egyptians realized that they had found the secret. Stone was the skin of the gods. Stone was forever. However, even the step pyramid was just a prototype. In the fourth dynasty, a pharaoh named Sneferu took the throne, possessed by the idea of the perfect pyramid. His journey was a comedy of errors and structural nightmares. His first attempt at Mightum started to collapse as the outer casing slid off. His second attempt, now known as the bent pyramid, had to have its angle changed halfway through because the base was sinking. Sneferu was failing, leaving a trail of crooked monuments. But he didn't give up. He learned from the cracks. He ordered a third pyramid, the Red Pyramid. This time, the angles were perfect. He had mastered the geometry of the gods, paving the way for his son, Khufu, to build the Great Pyramid at Giza. The Great Pyramid did not rise because of magic. It rose because of the most sophisticated human machine the world had ever seen. Imagine standing on the Giza plateau as the sun crests the horizon. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke and the sweat of 20,000 men. You don't hear the crack of a whip. You hear a rhythmic, thunderous chanting. The craftsmen of Khufu are strong. These weren't slaves. They were the first true national workforce. They were farmers who, during the months when the Nile flooded their fields, traveled to the capital to pay their labor tax. In return, they were fed the finest beef and unlimited beer. Over 20 years, they moved 2.3 million blocks of stone, some weighing as much as a semi-truck. When it was finished, the Great Pyramid was encased in polished white limestone and topped with solid gold. It burned with a blinding light that could be seen for 50 miles. This was the breakthrough. Egypt had moved from a collection of tribes to an industrial superpower. No, the old kingdom couldn't last forever. The weight of the stones eventually crushed the economy, and a century of low floods led to famine and civil war. But Egypt had a secret weapon. The Nile always returned. After centuries of chaos, the Middle Kingdom rose, focusing on the people and draining the marshes to create a massive breadbasket. But the greatest era, the New Kingdom, was born from the fire of an invasion. A mysterious people called the Hyksos had conquered northern Egypt using horse-drawn chariots. The Egyptians didn't just endure, they adapted. They took the chariot, perfected it, and drove the invaders back into the sea. The Egypt that emerged was no longer isolated. It was a tiger. The pharaohs of the New Kingdom became the world's first true imperialists. First, there was Hatshepsut, the woman who dared to be a king. She put on the false beard and ruled with a velvet glove, conquering through trade. She sent expeditions to the land of Punt, returning with ships loaded with frankincense and myrrh. But her stepson, Thutmose III, was the Napoleon of the ancient world. He led 17 military campaigns, pushing the Egyptian borders to the Euphrates River. The peak of this success was reached under Ramses the Great. He ruled for 66 years, fathered over 100 children, and built more monuments than any other human in history. At Abu Simbel, he ordered 4 60-foot statues of himself to be carved directly into a mountain. Twice a year, the sun's rays would travel 60 meters deep into the temple to illuminate his face. Under Ramses, Egypt was at the summit. The temples of Karnak and Luxor became cities within cities, painted in colors so bright they seemed to vibrate. They had defeated the desert and their neighbors. Through mummification and stone, they believed they were finally defeating death. But power, when it becomes absolute, often becomes blinded. The first major crack didn't come from an army. It came from the mind of a single radical pharaoh, Akhenaten, the heretic. He abolished the old gods and declared there was only one, the Aten, the disk of the sun. He tried to delete history, moving the capital to the empty desert and chiseling the names of the old gods off every wall. For 17 years, Egypt was paralyzed. When he died, the people reacted with fury, smashing his statues and erasing his name from the king lists. In the wake of this dark side, a young boy named Tutankhamun was placed on the throne to heal the nation. He was a tragic figure, a sickly teenager trying to steady a ship that was already taking on water. He died at 19, a fragile symbol of a dynasty losing its grip. As the internal drama played out, a terrifying shadow was moving across the Mediterranean, the Bronze Age collapse. From the mists came the sea peoples, refugees and pirates who had burned the Hittites and razed Troy. Ramses III, the last great pharaoh of the New Kingdom, stood on the banks of the delta and watched the horizon fill with foreign sails. He stopped them, luring their ships into the narrow channels where archers rained down fire. Egypt survived, but it was a hollow victory. The war bankrupted the treasury. In a moment that feels shockingly modern, the tomb builders at Deir el-Medina did something never before seen. They went on strike. They laid down their tools and refused to work for a pharaoh who couldn't feed them. The social contract was breaking. Ma'at, the cosmic order, was failing. But the darkest failure was the death of the dream of eternity. As the economy collapsed, a terrifying crime swept the Valley of the Kings: tomb robbery. This was committed by the very people who had built the tombs. The priests and officials realized the gold of the dead was worth more than the prayers of the living. They broke into the sacred chambers and tore the jewelry off the mummified fingers of their ancestors. The ultimate failure was the realization that death could be defeated by stone, but not by human greed. By the year 1000 BCE, Egypt had split in two. The world was entering the Age of Iron, and Egypt, the land of bronze and gold, was looking backward at a fading glory. The giants were gone, replaced by foreign conquerors: Libyans, Persians, and finally, Alexander the Great. When Alexander arrived in 332 BCE, he traveled deep into the desert to the oasis of Siwa, where an oracle whispered, "You are the Son of God." Alexander founded Alexandria, a city of marble that would become the brain of the ancient world. When he died, the crown passed to his general, Ptolemy. For 300 years, the Ptolemies ruled as Greek pharaohs. They built the Great Library and the Lighthouse of Alexandria, but they were outsiders. Except for the last and most legendary, Cleopatra VII. She was the first of her line to learn the Egyptian language. She looked at her crumbling kingdom and made a final gamble to save the legacy of the pharaohs by seducing the masters of Rome. She famously appeared before Julius Caesar, smuggling herself in a laundry bag, dreaming their son would rule a united world. When Caesar fell, she turned to Mark Antony. For a decade, Alexandria became a hedonistic empire. Cleopatra and Antony lived like gods, with Cleopatra sitting on a throne of gold as the goddess Isis. It was the last, great flicker of Egyptian majesty, a sunset of purple silk. No, the light was dying. In 31 BCE, their forces were crushed by Octavian at the Battle of Actium. Cleopatra, realizing she would be paraded in chains, chose a different path. Legend says she allowed an Egyptian cobra, the sacred uraeus, to strike. As the venom reached her heart, the line of the pharaohs finally snapped. Egypt didn't just lose a queen, it lost its soul. Octavian turned the country into his private property. The temples were neglected. The hieroglyphs were forgotten, becoming a silent code that no human could read for 2,000 years. The desert wind began to whistle through the empty halls of Karnak. For centuries, Egypt was a ghost. It lived in myths, but the real stories were buried under 50 feet of silt. Then, in 1799, a soldier in Napoleon's army found a piece of black stone in the mud near Rosetta. It was the key. When the code was cracked in 1822, the stones of Egypt began to speak again. They told us about a people who loved the sun and who were so terrified of being forgotten that they built the impossible. We look at the pyramids today, and we see tombs. No, the Egyptians saw them as machines for eternity. They believed that as long as a person's name was spoken, they would live forever. Did they succeed? Today, 5,000 years later, we still know the name of Ramses. We recognize the face of Nefertiti. Every time a child whispers, Tutankhamun, a boy who died 3 millennia ago lives again for a fraction of a second. The stone crumbled, the gold was looted, and the river changed its course. No, the idea of Egypt, the belief that the human spirit can reach for something eternal, has never faded. They are the only people in history who didn't just live in time. They built a home for themselves in forever. As the sun sets over the Giza plateau today, casting its shadow toward the skyscrapers of Cairo, the Sphinx still sits in the sand, watching the horizon. It reminds us that while our flesh is temporary, our stories are made of stone. The world fears time, but time fears the pyramids. And in the silence of the desert, the dead still speak to those who remember that to live in hearts we leave behind is not to die.